You are sitting in a room where the future of the world is being decided. Not metaphorically, literally. The year is 325 AD. The city is Nicaea, in what is now northwestern Turkey. You are a bishop of the Christian Church, one of 318 men summoned here from across the Roman Empire by the Emperor Constantine himself. Outside this room, the Roman Empire spans from Britain to Mesopotamia. It contains perhaps 60 million people. And for the last 250 years, the followers of Jesus of Nazareth have been tortured, fed to lions, burned alive, and crucified, not for what they believed, but for refusing to worship the emperor as a god. That era is over. 12 years ago, Constantine saw a vision before the Battle of Milvian Bridge. A cross in the sky. The words, "In this sign, conquer." He won the battle. He became emperor, and he decided that the God of the Christians was responsible for his victory. Now he wants something from you in return. He wants unity. Stay with me, because what happens in this room over the next 2 months will shape Christianity, Islam, and the entire Western world for the next 1700 years. And almost none of it happened the way you were taught. You did not choose to be here. You were summoned. The letter from Constantine arrived at your church months ago. It was not a request. It was a command. Phrased politely, as imperial commands always are, but unmistakably a command. You would travel to Nicaea at the emperor's expense. You would participate in a council. You would resolve the disputes that were tearing the Christian church apart. You did not argue. You have seen what Rome does to people who argue with the emperor. The journey took weeks. When you arrived in Nicaea, you found men from every corner of the empire. Bishops from Egypt, from Syria, from Persia, from Spain. Men who spoke Greek, Latin, Coptic, Syriac. Men who had spent years in prison for their faith. Some of them were missing eyes. Some had hands that had been mutilated during the persecutions. The marks of what Rome had done to Christians for 2 centuries were visible on the bodies of the men in this room. And the man who summoned you, the man responsible for ending those persecutions, was sitting at the head of the room in imperial purple, presiding over a church council he was not even baptized into. Constantine was not a Christian, not yet, not officially. He would not be baptized until he was on his deathbed, 30 years from now. But he was running this meeting. And you understood immediately that the theology being debated in this room was not purely a theological question. It was a political one. Here is what the dispute was actually about. A priest in Alexandria named Arius had been teaching something that was spreading rapidly across the Eastern Empire. His argument was logical, almost mathematical. God the Father existed before the Son. Jesus was created by God, the first and greatest of God's creations, but still a creation. There was a time, Arius said, when the Son did not exist. This sounds abstract. It was anything but. If Arius was right, Jesus was not fully divine. He was something between God and human, extraordinary, sacred, but not equal to the Father. This had enormous implications for everything, for prayer, for salvation, for the nature of baptism, for the relationship between the church and God. The bishop of Alexandria, Alexander, had excommunicated Arius. Arius had appealed. His ideas had spread. Churches across the empire were splitting. In some cities, different congregations were refusing to speak to each other. There were riots. Constantine did not care about the theology. Constantine cared about the riots. He needed the church unified. A divided church was a political problem. A unified church was a political tool, the most powerful tool imaginable for holding together an empire that was always on the verge of fracturing. You understood this. Every bishop in that room understood this. The question was what you were going to do about it. The debate lasted weeks. You listened to Arius make his case. He was brilliant. His argument was carefully constructed, scripturally grounded, logically coherent. You could see why it had spread. You could see why educated men across the empire found it compelling. You listened to his opponents, led by a young deacon from Alexandria named Athanasius, who was not even a bishop, who had no official standing in the council, but whose arguments were so sharp and so relentless that everyone listened anyway. Athanasius argued that if Jesus was not fully God, then salvation was impossible. A created being could not bridge the gap between humanity and the divine. Only God could save humanity from sin. Therefore, Jesus had to be fully God, not similar to God, not a reflection of God, but the same substance as God. Co-eternal, co-equal. The Greek word they used was homoousios, same substance. This single word, one word, would split the church for the next century. Here is what history does not tell you about the Council of Nicaea. It does not tell you that the vote was not unanimous. The final count was 316 in favor of the Nicene position, 2 against, with several abstentions. Arius and 2 bishops who refused to sign were exiled. It does not tell you that many of the bishops who voted for the Nicene Creed were not personally convinced by the theology. They voted with the majority because Constantine made clear, without saying it directly, in the way powerful men always make things clear, that the minority position would have consequences. It does not tell you that Arius was eventually recalled from exile, that Constantine, in the final years of his life, moved toward the Arian position, that the son who succeeded him was an Arian Christian, that the debate was not settled at Nicaea at all. It continued for another 50 years, and the outcome was not inevitable. It does not tell you that the Council of Nicaea did not decide what books would be in the Bible. That is the most important thing. The books of the Bible, the canon, were not decided at Nicaea. This is one of the most persistent myths in popular history. The council debated the nature of Christ. The biblical canon was a separate process that took place over centuries, with different churches accepting different books for different reasons, and was not formally standardized until much later. What was decided at Nicaea was the answer to one question. Was Jesus the same substance as God, or a similar but lesser being? The answer chosen, homoousios, same substance, became the foundation of what we now call Orthodox Christianity. The Trinity. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, co-equal and co-eternal. Every Christian church in the world today, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Evangelical, holds this position. Every one of them, in some form, recites the Nicene Creed that was written in this room. You helped write it. You sat in that room for 2 months. You listened to the arguments. You watched Constantine watch the bishops. You understood that theology and power had become completely inseparable, that what was being decided was not just what Christians believed, but what the Roman Empire would enforce. You signed the creed, not because you had no doubts, but because you understood what would happen to the church if it remained divided. You had lived through the persecutions. You had seen what Rome did to a church that could not defend itself. You had seen the bodies. A unified church under a sympathetic emperor was worth more than a theologically perfect argument that would fracture everything into pieces. You signed, and you went home. And the world you returned to was different from the world you had left. Here is what they do not teach you about the Council of Nicaea. They do not teach you that the men in that room were not abstract theologians debating ideas in a vacuum. They were human beings who had survived persecution, who carried the marks of empire on their bodies, who understood better than anyone what it cost to hold a minority position against the power of Rome. They do not teach you that Constantine's involvement in the council was not an act of Christian devotion. It was an act of political calculation, and the bishops knew it and made their own political calculations in response. They do not teach you that the Christianity that emerged from Nicaea was shaped not just by faith, but by the needs of an empire. That the God of a persecuted minority became, in a single generation, the God of the most powerful state in the Western world. They do not teach you what it felt like to be in that room, to know that words were being chosen, specific words in a specific sequence, that would define the faith of billions of people across 17 centuries. To know that you were one of the people choosing them, and to know that history would remember the creed. But not the men who wrote it, not the doubts they carried, not the calculations they made, not what it cost them to sign. Was the Council of Nicaea a triumph of faith or a triumph of power? The honest answer is that it was both, at the same time, by the same men. And that tension between genuine belief and political necessity, between theology and empire, has never been resolved. It is still there. In every church, in every creed. Leave your answer in the comments, because I think this is the question that matters more than any theological argument decided in that room. Subscribe, because every story on this channel asks the same thing. What really happened? Who was really in the room? And what it actually cost them to be there?